So in this section, we're going to add a new entity to our application for our comments and also set this up and configure the migration. So the kind of things we've done before, but of course, we're going to do it again to accommodate this feature. So in the domain project, we'll create a new class called comment. And this class, what we're going to give this is a prop of an int. We'll use an int for this ID. And what we'll do is we'll use a string for the body. And this is going to be their comment text. And then we'll add some related properties. We want to get the app user, and we'll call this author of the comment. And we'll also add the activity and call it activity. And we'll also add a date time property. And we'll call this created at. And we'll need to bring in system for this, for the date time. But what we'll also do is give this an initial value. And we'll set this to datetime.utc now in this case. And this means the date time of the comments are going to be stored in our database as the time is on UTC time. So no matter where the comment is being added from anywhere in the world, it's always going to be stored in our database at UTC time. Now there is another time property that we can use to store the offset of the time zone that the comment was created at versus the normal date time, which doesn't include the offset. But SQLite is an example of a database that does not support the additional time information when we use that. So we'll just stick with normal date times, but we'll store it as a UTC time. And then what we'll do, we'll add a relation to our activities for the comments. And what we'll do is we'll go to our activity entity. And what we'll do is a similar thing that we did for our activity attendees. So that we can add a new comment, we're going to initialize this list at the same time as well. So what we'll do is we'll say prop, and it's going to be an iCollection of type comment, and we'll call it comments, and we'll set it to a new list, and we'll call it comments, so that we initialize that list as well. And then we can head over to our data context and configure this in there. And we'll add a new DB set for this because we are going to want to query the comments directly, and we're not going to return them with our activities. And we'll give the table a name of comments. Now by default, when Entity Framework takes a look at this relationship between our activity and our comments, and between our user and our comments as well, then it's going to restrict the delete behavior. So if we delete an activity, it won't also delete the comments. And same goes for the user. If we delete the user, it's not going to delete the comments because of the conventions that Entity Framework uses. And whilst we're not giving our users the ability to delete either the activity or the app user in this case, I do want to show you an example of how you can configure this to set this up. And we'll take a look at the migration and see what it's going to do when we add this configuration. So what we'll do is we'll use the builder and we'll say entity. And then we're going to configure the comment entity. And what we're going to do is say has one. And we'll say A goes to A.activity. And then we'll say with many. And we'll say C goes to C.comments. And then we can add the onDelete behavior. And we can specify the delete behavior to cascade. And what this will mean, if we delete an activity, it will cascade that delete down to the comments that are associated with that activity. Now we could do this for the user side as well, but we're not going to. And I'll explain why when we create the migration. So what we'll do is we'll create the migration now, and we'll go across to our API terminal. And we always need to stop the API, don't forget when we do this. And we'll cd up to reactivities, and we'll say .NET migrations add, and we'll say comment entity added, and we'll specify P for persistence and S for the API, and press return. And of course I need to add .NET EF migrations add and press return. And that migration's created successfully. So let's go take a look. And if we open up the migrations folder and scroll down and select our new migration, then we've got the create table, and it's going to create it with the 5 columns here. We've got the author ID and the activity ID. And if we take a look at the constraints for this table, then we've got our 2 foreign keys for the activity ID and the author ID. But in the case of the activities, we've got the delete action as cascade, and in the author, we've got delete action and restrict. In other words, if we delete an activity, then that's going to cascade to the comments associated with the activity. If we delete a user, then their comments are going to remain attached to the activity. And why would you want to do something like this? Well, you can maintain the comments inside the comments for an activity, but if the user was to be deleted, then you would return null for that user's display name and username. But what you could do is replace the text of the user's display name with something like deleted user. And therefore you maintain the comments, but you don't necessarily have to maintain the users. And that's quite a common thing that you see in applications where a user has deleted their account. Maybe something remains, but in its place, we'll just say deleted user instead. So now we've got our comment entities set up and added. What we'll take a look at next is what we're going to return to the client in the form of a comment DTO, because we cannot return this entity directly because of the relations that we've got here. And we'll take a look at that next.